spotlight on Giganotosaurus, sometimes pronounced Giganotosaurus, depending on where you look online or who you ask. A generally more primitive carnivore that doesn't have jaws quite as strong as Tyrannosaurus rex. Various re-examinations seem to hint that it may be slightly smaller or slightly larger than T-Rex. As a member of the Carcharodontosaurid family, it has a shorter or straighter neck than most other carnosaurs, which have a longer S-curve. It has a long, more narrow skull and large teeth that are more for slashing than bone crushing. This here is a size chart with the maximum estimate of the size of a very large Giganotosaurus, which is closer to the old size estimate than the more recent ones. Most modern reconstructions cite it to be between 40 and 43 feet long. Although the original discovery of the skeleton is only one species, and the entire skeleton has not yet been discovered, various closer relatives do exist in the known fossil record. Giganotosaurus has never been found as a baby or a juvenile, nor is it quite clear the maximum size they could get to because of the fragmentary remains. Here I'm drawing out the full skeleton as a line art over my original sketch. I'm making certain corrections as I go along. As you can see, the original sketch was mostly very detailed, but not entirely. I didn't add in the small ribs on the bottom, and I actually made a mistake on the hands because it turns out they can't pronate or face towards the ground. Some of the fossil evidence I looked at for research was incorrect, but I was corrected by someone online when they told me that the hands have to face each other in a clapping pose, which I'll get to in a little bit. Here I'm just coloring in the skeleton by shading it in more quickly. They have a raised spine forming a sort of hunched ridge on the back, which is also a feature of other close relatives in this family. The name Giganotosaurus means giant southern lizard. First described officially in the year 1995, it was discovered in the year 1993 by an amateur fossil hunter, Ruben Dario Carlini, for which the species name was named after. As already stated, it may or may not have been larger than T-Rex according to more recent evidence. But what is known is that the skull, that was discovered, was 5.2 feet long, which is 1.6 meters, and altogether would weigh more than an adult human, which is a very, very large skull for any animal to have. I'm now working on the musculature. I was actually using the selection tool to gather the areas of the muscle and then filling it in more alpha-locked in Procreate so that I could get the shadows, shading, and highlights in. At some points, I removed the alpha lock to go outside of the initial lines I had put, and at other points, I stayed within a selected area. I'm filling in the shadows and the highlights, as well as the tone and shades here. I'm kind of filling it in piecemeal, but going back and forth and adding additional deeper shadows. I'm trying to get the anatomy as accurate as possible, and if there are any mistakes, please forgive me. I'm still learning as I go along, even though I have been studying dinosaurs almost my entire life. It's still a good idea to continue learning and trying to get better. At some points, I made the musculature layer more see-through so that I could see through to the skeletal reference underneath better to try to make sure the anatomy was more accurate to the skeleton. Working on the full reconstruction now, I was trying to get the outline done and make sure the shape of it actually matched over the muscles correctly. I'm now filling in all the teeth and trying to get more of the details filled in. It's very important to use all the different things at your disposal. I chose to go outside the area of the musculature by adding a thickness for the skin. I added a dewlap on the throat because it's plausible, as well as a series of spines along the back. Here you can see the solid color filled in. As I go over it, I'm using different layers of transparency. I'm filling in shadows and highlights over top of the flat colors. I'm blending in and using different textured brushes to quickly add the impression of scales. I'm also going in and using different layers in order to get different effects. The shadow layer, for example, is on top of the other layers, but later when I add a highlight layer, I will put that layer on top of the shadows. Using layers in the correct order can make a big difference and make it easier for you to get the entire picture done. I selected the colors here by deciding ones that I thought felt realistic. Any sort of dewlap and chin patch might have bright colors because birds and lizards have colors there for display purposes amongst their own kind when searching for mates. I thought it very reasonable that a Giganotosaurus might have something similar. In general, I gave it a more camouflaged color. I'm going back over here to create line art so I can use it for an art tip page. It's also a good idea to really define the forms sometimes to further understand them. This is done on a separate layer and then finalized with the background more see-through. I'm going back through and doing line art versions of all the different parts of the reconstruction. It's good to look at different things as reference, rather than just one reference. If you're doing an anatomy study and reconstruction of an animal, like I am here, it's often good to look at various references. Some paleontologists, when doing paleo art, will think of the reconstruction one way, while others will think of it another way. It's a good idea to study what evidence you can and come up with your own conclusions. Additional study is also very helpful when it comes to reading about the relatives of the animal that you are reconstructing. Here I'm taking my previously created picture and using it as a reference for myself to try to create a more interesting or dynamic pose, because I was not happy with the pose of my original reconstruction, even though I was quite happy with the accuracy and the coloration. So I'm working out some more interesting or action-based poses and picking one in order to enlarge it and draw a more complete picture in that pose. One of the largest of all the predatory dinosaurs, and the largest predatory dinosaur known from South America. It was from the Cretaceous period, 99.6 to 97 million years ago is the estimate from carbon dating, which is 30 million years before Tyrannosaurus rex. It appears it was a faster runner than Tyrannosaurus rex. It also may have hunted in packs, because a close relative that was discovered was found in a bone bed where several individuals had died together, which is evidence that they may have hunted in a pack together in life. It could have been more of a swarm, the way Komodo dragons hunt, than an organized pack. They had a smaller brain than Tyrannosaurus rex by about half the size, despite possibly being larger, and was less likely to be a more intelligent animal, and far more likely to have not been very smart. Giganotosaurus was perhaps 14 tons, but there are different estimates guessing the weight. It's hard to guess the mass of these animals because, unlike other large animals alive today, they actually had hollow bones and air sacs and were probably a bit lighter weight in comparison to a mammal of such a size. It's also known that their arms proportionally were larger than Tyrannosaurus rex, but still small overall. Some of the large animals that lived in the same time and place as them were some of the largest and absolutely the largest animals ever known to live, particularly of land animals. It is known that Argentinosaurus, for example, lived in the same time and place. An Argentinosaurus was an absolute behemoth at 50 tons, a large, long-necked, long-tailed sauropod dinosaur. A Giganotosaurus would probably have to hunt in a pack in order to kill one of these things, so it stands to reason that perhaps they did. A predator needs the tools in its toolkit to actually be able to hunt its prey, so any plausible theory that says that this animal could hunt the actual prey animals that lived in its habitat should not be discarded. In general, this animal had a straight, short neck, a large, ridgy spine, large legs, long, narrow jaws with slashing-type teeth. It had a fairly long, counterbalancing tail, and had larger arms proportionately than a tyrannosaur, but still small overall. As stated before, these arms cannot pronate and therefore can only face each other in more of a clapping pose. The wrist cannot rotate to face downwards towards the ground. The eyes are fairly small and more stereoscopic, and therefore they face forward, providing good depth perception for hunting. I'm adding many details here. By going through, I'm adding shading and scale details using various texture brushes, as well as using some of the main paintbrushing tools to do most of the main work for painting here. I'm going back in and adding rib lighting and highlights. Rib lighting is often very pleasing to the eye, and it's when light's striking from behind an object in order to outline it in a paler tone than the main color around it. I'm quickly about to rough in a shadow. I try to get the shape of the dinosaur in the shadow, but subtly. And I'm using various texture brushes and paint brushes here to get a background in. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I actually later took this same art and done a much more complete background, but I'd already finished recording this video, and I'd done that one in a different sized file as well. I hope you look forward to future videos, and I'm definitely going to be working on a new opening animation, but it'll be a bit of work, so you'll have to wait and see. I'll see you next time. Goodbye!